Good evening, everyone. I am Mark, and welcome to Saratoga Daily, presented by On the Wrong Lead. I'm here with Caleb, the one and only at Caleb WVU on Twitter, and we're gonna talk a little bit of Saratoga. But first off, so Caleb, how'd your day go? Because I think it went about the same as mine did.
Yeah, today was not a great day. I thought that I had a good handle on the early sequence and was a little more uncertain on the back half of the card. So I tried to direct most of my energy at the front and missed most of those races. I hit the chalky leg and I think race 5 with the even money horse. But other than that, didn't get too many home in the early part of the sequence. So then kind of shortened up and played a little more defensively and would have probably ended up hitting the late pick 4 had I actually played that. So not the greatest day, all things considered, but it was a tough day. I think a lot of trends that we've seen hold for the first 2 weeks of Saratoga kind of got turned on their head today. But curious to see how you did and what you thought.
Yeah, I did the same thing. Basically the same as you. I couldn't hit the broadside of a barn. My early pick 5, I tried to get really kind of cute and leverage up, and got knocked out. I think first leg with a bit of a price maiden one. Late I was trying to seam some stuff together, and I just couldn't get anything really hooked up. I think it's the first day of the meet so far where I haven't connected on any ticket. I don't think I cashed a single ticket on the day. There's 3 or 4 positions that I liked in the sequence, given how the track had been playing, and I think the track changed quite a bit. I don't know if it necessarily changed or if it's more of a situation of jockeys chasing, but yeah, it was a real rough day.
Yeah, the turf today is what really was giving me fits. The main track, like I think on the early part of the card, it looked like you really wanted to be forwardly placed and kind of on that rail. As the races went on, I'm not sure if that held the entire time, as we did see some horses come from off a little bit as the day went on. But the turf, like it was for the first 2 weeks, unless you were just tons the best, you could not win on the lead on this turf course. And today, they did move the rails out from 12 to 18 feet. Maybe that played a factor. Yeah, you wouldn't think 6 feet is a huge difference, but maybe it did. You also saw some jocks, I think, maybe gave some questionable rides. That's probably giving them more credit than they deserve,
Yeah.
especially in that turf sprint race. But nevertheless, you may have had jocks doing a little bit of gamesmanship and handicapping themselves and overplaying a bias that ended up letting a lot of horses just kind of walk on the front and take it gate to wire. So it was tough when it's hard enough to handicap these races to get winners just looking at the form. But when you have Castellano ends up rating Saif way off the pace, and that 8 horse Vici gets taken way off the pace, and Irad wires on the 3 in that turf sprint, and I think race 8 maybe it was. That's a tough one to have. Like it's tough to predict that one going that way.
Yeah, I would completely agree. And I think what often happens is, especially at a big meet like Saratoga, there's so much more media hype around the meet than a small, whatever, a Tampa meet or something like that. So you end up with this. All these jocks are reading on Twitter about all the bias. They're reading on DRF about the bias. They're hearing from all the owners and trainers and all the connections about the bias. And you get this situation where these jocks start chasing a bias. They assume, oh, hey, on these turf races, I can't be on the front end, so I'm going to rate a speed horse. And then you get somebody who's got a real, out of the back closer. Well, I can't come deep on the turf either, so I got to stay up close. So everybody, instead of riding their horse and doing, slightly altering them to put them in a better position, they're so altering that horse's run style that they end up just throwing all chances away. And I think it's more that sort of a situation is what you saw today. I don't think because obviously a bias is a propensity of, if you look at the average run style, it's a propensity sort of towards a certain run style being more effective on a certain track. And I think everybody's chasing that effective run style, and you get these really wonky days. I will say that I think later on the card, you saw a little bit more of a reversion to the mean. I think the later sequence was more formful, and I wonder if that's just jocks who had some, I know Chad Brown was pretty livid on Twitter about a couple of rides that he saw from a couple of his jocks today. So I wonder if a couple jocks got reamed and they said, okay, let's stop being stupid and chasing this bias and be a little bit ride to more what the horse needs. But I mean, Sayoff is the one that jumps out at me as that horse has always shown speed, and the horse is way off and trying to get that pocket trip that was working the first 2 weeks, and that wasn't working today. And just sort of, what are you doing? You took your horse completely out of its element. It doesn't even hit the board, and was much the best on paper. So a lot of real questionable rides, and hoping it settles down the rest of the week.
Yeah, I'm hoping so as well. Can't have too many days like today.
Yeah, so I know we were talking beforehand about sequences that look good. I think there's a lot of. I didn't really like a bigger sequence, a pick four or a pick five. I liked a lot of sort of more spot plays in this sequence, and I think we start off here looking at the sixth race that we were talking about. I think there's a couple of really sort of interesting horses in here. I was really into this. I don't think you'll end up getting the price on the morning line, but the four Spring to Summer, Clement with Rosario up. Obviously, they've been the real hot connections. You're getting 8-1 on the morning line. That'll probably be chopped in half. Horse wasn't anyone that screamed off on works, but super interesting. There's also a Maker with Jose up. Obviously, good connections there as well. And some horses that and a horse that can probably improve second or first start in the Maker barn. And the other one that I was really interested in here is obviously the Chad Brown horse. That's logical. A horse that gets a bit of a drop in class, and second time out, a little bit easier company, and maybe improves some. I thought all three of those were sort of super interesting in here, super logical. But it's a big enough field that even if you're on one of these logical prices, you're gonna get paid fairly decently. So didn't know what you were looking at in here. You thought interesting.
Yeah, so I did like this race, and I agree with you on a couple of the picks. I think the Clement first time starter is interesting. Sometimes I don't quite know what to do with high profile connections that debut a horse in maiden claiming.
Yeah.
It's not unheard of for Clement to do that, maybe in the way that it would be for Brown or Baffert or Pletcher to do something like that. But it's always something that kind of makes me take notice. Maybe connections are being realistic, or maybe this horse isn't quite what they thought. It is a homebred, so I don't think it's quite as much of a cause for concern as if they paid 500 grand for this horse or something. But we have what I think is kind of a rare opportunity to bet against Chad Brown and hopefully not get totally screwed. Chad Brown, going into today, Chad Brown was like 0 for his last 18, and I think he had at least 4 horses in today that did not win. 0 for 22 is a small sample size, but for a 30% guy to go 0 for 22, that's the odds of that have to be like 75-1 or something.
Yeah, he's 22% right now, and he started off about a week ago at 35%. So it's gone off a cliff pretty quickly.
So and the thing is, maybe you could argue this isn't his best stock, and I would give some credit to that argument. But I look at a race like this, and on the card as a whole, honestly, I do think that there is some vulnerable favorites. And probably my favorite thing to do in betting the horses is to attack bad favorites. I don't like to slam chalk. It just isn't really fitting with my play style. But I do love to toss favorites that I think are vulnerable. And I think this is a good race to kind of highlight that. That Chad Brown horse makes sense. He's dropping in class. He's second start out. But for me, it's the horse debuted in a maiden claiming race, failed as the favorite, and never really threatened. Does get some class relief here, but there are others that are dropping from maiden special weight or higher level maiden claiming. There's some kind of dangerous first time starters that may have a shot here. There's some surface switchers. There's a lot of ways you can go in this that I'm not going to be too interested to bet a horse like that Chad Brown dropper, especially given his recent cold snap.
I was just saying, I would completely agree with you. I think if you want to talk about this, that Chad Brown horse will probably take a lot of money just in connections. It's Chad Brown, it's a rad, it's Claverack Stables, and it's the kind of horse I think you angle to get around. It's the type that especially in a race with a lot of other options, it's the kind of Chad that I want to be. And I would agree with you. I think that horse probably gets cut in half on the board because there's no horse that jumps out at you and screams that it's a monster in here. So you're looking at that horse and going, yeah, it's probably going to take a ton of money. Second start, Chad Brown, all the connections there. And it's the kind of favorite that I want to be. One thing you mentioned, Clement does not debut at maiden claiming very often, but when he does, he's very deadly. In the last year, he's had 13 of them. They've hit at 31% for a $6.50 ROI. So when Clement does debut maiden claim, he is really really good. And considering the recent success with Rosario up, it would be a one of those horses that I'll kind of watch the board. If I can get near this morning line, it might be a win slam type of horse. If the horse gets cut in half, maybe I build it into a daily double or a pick three, assuming that everybody else sees that it's live and it maybe really is. So I think it depends on what kind of odds you're getting here, but those are the types of horses I like to take stabs at, where everything's there and you're getting a price because you don't know what you have quite yet.
Yeah, I completely understand that, and I haven't decided how I'll play this race. I did mark a few horses I thought were interesting, and I don't want to spend 20 minutes talking about a maiden claim in 40. But I just wanted to probably point out the one horse that I am going to use at some point that probably will be the longest shot on the board is going to be this 6. If you're a Cherokee Song. So if you're a connections player, probably not going to get to this horse. Randy Prasad is not a high percentage guy. He's not good at Saratoga. There's pretty much no connection stat that's going to get you onto this horse. But for me, if you look at his turf starts and kind of draw a line through the dirt efforts where this is just the wrong surface, the horse hasn't run poorly. That last race at June 21st at Belmont was the first off a 5-month layoff. The horse was super green and rank. It was tugging the whole time, had to steady a couple times, throwing her head, excuse me. Just never really got comfortable. And she ran evenly that day. I mean, was only beaten 5 lengths. That race seems to be live, where the winner and the show horse both came back to win next out. And if you go back farther than that, in the fall winter New York meet, some of those Belmont and Aqueduct turf races aren't that far off from here on speed figures and whatever else. And that was against Maiden Special Weight Company for the most part. So I kind of think that this horse is also getting a little bit of class relief here on the drop. I would probably consider Eric Cancel an upgrade over Luis Cardenas as far as jocks go, making second start off the layoff. And if this filly can kind of get back to that late 2019 form or take a bit of a step forward off of that, I think she could be, at the very least, a exotics contender to hit the board coming late if she gets a decent trip and doesn't have that immaturity, green rankness that she showed last time.
Yeah, I completely agree with you here. She's a horse that on her figures fits. She's not that far out of this. Gets some class relief. Class relief should benefit her just as much as the Chad that's outside of her at that's going to probably go off at 10% of the price or whatever. I don't hate that horse at all. I think the horse actually makes quite a bit of sense. And if you look at some of the company lines, there's a lot of horses that are italicized, meaning they won next out or winners that she's run versus. British Idiom being one of them. Which I realized that was in August of 2019, but that race is a massive key race, her initial debut. So she's a horse that feels due. Maybe he's finding the right class level here, and you're going to get the longest price in the board at probably double the morning line. So I would never talk somebody off that, especially in a maiden claiming race. You want to hop into maybe the 7th race? I think we both had a similar opinion in this one.
Yeah, sure. As far as the 7th race goes, there's the morning line has it pegged as a 2-horse race. I don't see it between the 5 and the 8. I don't see it that way. I do like the 8. I will be using the 8 somewhat prominently on my tickets, but this horse has had 4 or 5 shots now at this level, and then probably an attempt at a weaker level than this, claiming 40 and non-winners of 2. It just doesn't seem to get the job done. So I am going to be using the 8, but it's not a horse that I'm going to love at 7-5. The 5 horse is the 8-5 or 9-5 second choice, who this colt probably hangs even worse than the 8 does. So I think both of these are favorites that are deserving favorites based on what they've done on paper, speed figs and connections and whatnot. But there are a couple different ways you can go here. And I'll probably totally toss the 5, and I'll probably use the 8 to some extent. But there's also a few prices in here I thought were kind of interesting, and I know we both kind of ended up on one of them. Do you want to talk about year 2, Starship Bubba?
Yeah, I do want to talk about Starship Bubba. I think the eight, I completely agree with you. The five is probably just a complete toss for me. The horse has had way too many chances and needs softer company. The eight is a horse you probably have to use in some way, shape, or form. But, I think Starship Bubba in here, this is a horse that Orlando Noda has had just a really good Saratoga meet. He's a very good Saratoga trainer, and he's one of those small barn trainers that points really well. You're getting Josel Rosario is taking the call here for seems like no reason, and I would assume he had other options in this field. Horse has been gelded since last start, and normally when they geld a horse, they're taking a little bit more of a realistic look at the horses, the horses races. And if you go back to some of those, there's a lot of sort of upside angles in here, and it's a horse that just sort of makes a lot of sense. Probably needs to improve a little bit, but I would imagine going to the Noda barn and being pointed towards this probably does. And I think this is softer company than this horse has really faced in the last couple of starts. It just seems to be an interesting horse with a bit of dirtied up form, and if you kind of get clean out some of that form, there's some classiness there and some back class that looks interesting here.
Yeah, I completely agree. I don't know if I'd go as far as say that there's back class per se based on the class levels, but I do think that you have to respect everything coming out of the Orlando Noda barn right now.
Yeah.
This horse just makes sense based on that. Like they had Noda and Rosario teamed up for a win today with the Danny California in one of the afternoon races. And despite not having a ton of horses in his barn, he spots them very well. So I think that horse could be super live off the first time gelding. I would probably go on to say there's a lot of ways you can go after that horse. I don't want to talk about all of them, but the one I do think is a little interesting is, in addition to the 2, would be the 6, Polar Bear Pete. Again, if you're a connections player, he's not the easiest to get to. Edward Barker sucks at Saratoga. But this horse, if you want to talk a little bit back class, has been in just way over his head for the majority of his career.
Yeah.
It looks like connections thought they had something really nice after a flashy maiden score. Threw him into some high-level optional claiming races, some listed stakes races. Never quite put it together enough to get the job done, but did enough to maybe keep the connections coming back. They got a little bit desperate last out and threw him onto the turf in his last 2. That clearly was not the answer. He also showed a lot more speed in those 2 races, which could be a function of the stretch out on turf or also the addition of the blinkers. But I think he'll be a little more forwardly placed than we've been seeing here. I don't see a ton of speed in this race other than the 5. And I think the 6 has enough back class on dirt to sit just off the 5. And if that one starts to get a little bit short in the lane, probably gets first run. So I do think that's one who I found a little bit interesting at a pretty generous morning line.
Yeah, I would completely agree with your 6 as well here. If you are a key race person, look at that 3-back race where Power Up Painter is there, Rejected Again was in there. I think it's Skipped on Orchard was there. They have all since had wins again, and obviously dirt is the proper surface for this horse. So where the best figures have come, most competitive races has come. The last 2 on turf, you could just toss. And when we talk about dirtied up form, Polar Bear Pete is the definition of dirtied up form. Those last 2 races where the horse is beat by 23 and 20 lengths in the last 2, that's not the surface, quite obviously. So when you go back to those dirt races, it kind of fits with this bunch, and you're going to get a massive price here on a horse that makes a lot of sense. And I know what was it, the runner up? So Power Up Painter came out of that dirt race in March. And ran an 82 next out. So if you play that sort of next out and back on the right surface, there's some room for an improvement angle here on this one.
Yeah, completely agree.
You want to hop into the 8th race and talk through that one, where I think there's this 8th race came up pretty salty as well for an optional 40.
Yeah, sure. I do think this 8th race came up tough. And another one where I think I won't take a crazy aggressive stance and say like the favorite's horrible, because the favorite's 7-2. So that lets you know right off the bat there is no standout in this field. But the favorite is one I don't want to use. It's a horse that's moving up in class that has only raced once in the past year and a half, almost 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, that once was a win, I suppose, but that was for Chad Brown, which is, Jorge Abreu is a nice trainer, but this is not Chad Brown, despite his cold snap and whatever else. So I think this horse could be very vulnerable here. Um, the problem I had was I didn't particularly love anybody else. I was looking mostly towards some of these inside horses. A horse like the one and the two, Pekka Tonica, and then Blue Atlas, or both horses I thought were interesting. Blue Atlas is stepping way up in class, but a lot of the figures this horse fits, and Horatio De Paz hasn't had a winner at Saratoga yet, but he's had out of 5 starters, he's had 4 second places and 1 third place. So to me, that tells me that his barn is live. He just hasn't quite had the breaks yet that he needs to get the wins. And I expect a reversion to the mean for a guy who's a 21% trainer to start picking up a few wins here. Jose Ortiz stays on. He had a couple options here, including the one horse who he won with last out. So I think that's very interesting. It's a Barry Schwartz horse who's been sending a lot of live horses to Saratoga so far. It'll be interesting to see if the horse handles the trip and the course here. It doesn't have the best record at this track or at this distance. But I do think that Blue Atlas is one that I'm a little bit interested in, especially at 6-1.
Yeah, I completely agree. Your 1 and 2 were my top two picks. Obviously, these inside posts and these turf routes have been really, really good, and you're getting, getting some solid jockey choice here as well. Obviously, Jose Ortiz seemed to have had choice. He was on both the 1 and the 2 last out, and he chose the 2 Blue Atlas. So I would probably take the 2 a little bit over the 1. And when I had initially done my first capping of this, I actually sent you a message and said this card is literally the definition of terrible favorites, and I'm going to probably talk this horse right into the winner's circle here, but you're 6. My heart belongs to daddy. First thing, George Abreu is a 5% first-year trainer. On top of that, this horse is coming out of the Chad Brown barn. There are very few barns in the country that I do not want to bet a horse out of, and that's one of them is Chad Brown. He's one of 2 or 3 people that, horses do not move out of the Chad Brown barn and then improve. It just doesn't happen. And then stack on top of that, the trainer is 5% with his with the horses out of his first start for his barn. Those are terrible things, and this horse probably takes money on the fact that this horse has the best figures on turf in this race. Jose Ortiz obviously had choice again, and he gets off this horse, which tells you, and he does ride for George Abreu quite a bit. So it says that, even Jose wasn't really believing in this horse, who on paper appears to be the best, probably takes money off all the connections, all the angles, and this is just not a horse that I want any part of. And I would just not trust here. And I think there's a couple other spots in here where you on this card where you can make some opinions like this, and I think you'll get paid for doing so.
Yeah, I 100% agree. I think that's why I kind of like the sequence that we're talking about here, because I think it's one of those sequences you can play a pick 3 and you don't have to slam an opinion, because I think you can afford to spread a little bit, because I don't think it's highly likely that you're going to see some overwhelming favorites just run away with it. And I think a lot of the favorites that people are going to try to build tickets around are very vulnerable. So I agree. I don't like the 6. And he probably won't make a ticket of mine. I was most interested in the 1 and 2. Maybe there's a couple others that might make my ticket come tomorrow. But I agree with you. I think there's some weak favorites here, and this is probably chief amongst them.
Yeah, no, completely agreed. And again, I will say there's some other horses in here that are interesting. If speed is really good on the turf again, somebody like the 3 Short Pour would make a lot of sense. Horse hasn't really gotten this distance well, but this is sort of your speed horse, and if speed is really carrying well, which you can make an argument it was today, that's sort of an interesting sort of spot horse in this in this spot as well. Any other races or any other spots you want to talk about? Anything else that was interesting to you?
The only other race I thought was kind of interesting might have been the feature, the John Morrissey, I think it was.
Yeah,
John Morrissey. Yep. So it's interesting in the sense that, I think it's a fun race. Like, 7 furlongs is a distance that just kind of is a recipe for chaos. But as far as bad favorites go, I actually do think that this favorite is very legit in the four Amundsen, or Amundsen rather. I've already talked about the trainer, or the owner, and the jockey for that matter. And he also just seems like he's controlling speed here. So I do think that in a sequence where a lot of the favorites could be pretty vulnerable, I do think this is one I'm going to be more likely to lean on because I'm just not really enamored with anybody else. But was just a little bit curious to see if you had any price that you loved in this race or how you felt about the favorite.
I don't like the favorite at all in here. And
Okay.
quite honestly, my issue has been the fact that speed has not been good historically at Saratoga at 7 furlongs, and this year it has not been good at Saratoga at 7 furlongs. If speed suddenly becomes really good, okay, maybe, Amundsen, or however you say it, is a logical player in here. But, horses, no win machine, and has only hit the board once in his two starts at Saratoga. The horses that I wanted a little more, I wanted a little bit more closer in here. And I was looking at horses more along the lines of somebody like Funny Guy, um, my boy Tate, who I thought would be a little bit more off the pace as well, and also even somebody like, and I can't get it on the screen here, and I realize it's out of the Cox barn, which is scary right now, but Celtic Chaos. I wanted horses that were a little bit more off the pace because what we saw, we didn't see a 7 furlong race today, but when we saw the first 2 weeks, these were all sort of off the pace winners. And I wanted somebody a little more off the pace. I'm assuming today was sort of an outlier as far as races go, and we'll return more to Classic Saratoga. And Classic Saratoga 7 furlongs has been more of a closer's distance, and so I wanted sort of some of the more off the pace types. Although I will completely give it to you, the four is definitely sort of is. Could very well be lone speed in here, and is sort of speed of the speeds at the least. So, albeit is winless at the distance. So I kind of wonder, does the four maybe want a little bit shorter?
Yeah, I think that's my biggest concern with the four is the distance. Like I know that I led the conversation with 7 furlongs as a chaos distance, and then I made a case for the favorite. But I do think that is the horse to beat in my mind. But I do think that there's certainly some very valid concerns about can this horse get the distance. Tired last out going the 7 furlong trip really seems to be better going about 6 to 6.5. So I definitely get that. I guess my problem was I just didn't really like anybody else. I looked at Pat on the Back. That might be a horse I could make a case for. The connections, both jockey and trainer, have been very cold so far to start Saratoga. Dylan Davis never has a particularly good meet, but the Englehart barn, both Englehart barns actually have been pretty cold so far to start. I did look at a horse like Funny Guy, and he wouldn't be impossible. I think he does make a lot of sense. Ran a big race last time out. My boy Tate, he kind of strikes me as more of an off-track specialist. He's perfect 4 for 4 over off tracks, and then 2 for 11 over a fast course. So he's one I would definitely include if they get rain, but probably going to downgrade a bit over a fast track. But yeah, I just had a hard time finding anybody that I really liked after the four. Bankit, that horse is going to take money, but he's just a hard horse to trust. He just doesn't win very much, no matter what he's trying or what distance he's running at. So I don't know. Those connections are also pretty cold. So to me, it was more of a if I'm not going to key around Amundsen or Amundsen, I don't know who I'd really want to add. I'd probably have to go really deep in this race, and I'm not sure I want to do that. But yeah, I agree that the distance here could set it up for some pretty interesting off the pace runners.
Yeah, I would agree with you. Bankett does have the right run style, but he just hates getting his photo taken. He's 3 for 20, but 13 of 20 in the on the board. So it's a horse that loves to suck up and get second or third, but just really hates to get his photo taken. And I don't know necessarily does the cutback work for him here. He seems to be, I don't know. He seems to kind of be a mile, maybe even a mile and a 16th horse.
Yeah,
They seem to keep chasing the distance with him. He almost got there at a mile, so we're going to stretch him out to a mile, in that the fifth season. So then they stretch him out to a mile and a 16th in the Razorback, where he almost then got there again. And it's sort of, he just doesn't quite have that will to win. And with Santana being as poor as he's been so far this meet, I mean, obviously Santana takes the best of the Asmussen bar now. Asmussen's sitting at 20%, where Santana's sitting at 7%. He's got 2 wins on the meet, and I think both of them came on Sunday. So and one when he was with it, which is an absolutely overpowered favorite. So I'm a little. I also kind of put an asterisk next to Santana about, is his riding just a little suspect right now? Is he just hasn't figured the track out yet? He's obviously a very good jock. I'm not going to beat up Santana, but maybe he just needs to figure the track out, or and I think also the first couple of weeks some of his mounts were pretty subpar. So
Yeah, no, I completely agree. It's not a horse at 3-1 bank. It's not a horse I'm going to have, and you're not going to get a price on him based on the name recognition and who he's been facing. So that's a horse that's just going to beat me if he beats me.
yeah, same for me. He's going to beat me if he beats me. He's a horse I just won't have on any ticket, and I probably just talked him into the winner's circle. But he's the for me, he's very much the Caleb takeout reducer in this race. So
There we go.
Yep, just talked him into the winner's circle, didn't I?
Yep.
Anyways, we were on the wrong lead. Thanks you for tuning into Saratoga Daily. Hop on Discord and chat it up with us. After scratches tomorrow, we'll definitely probably have some tweaks to some of these plays. And we're not looking for any more rain overnight. I thought we might get a little bit, but it does not look like it's going to happen. So till next time, good luck with the races.